Manager accuses black employee of stealing, then gets caught on camera. I saw him take it. I want him gone, now. The voice was loud, sharp, filled with righteous fury. It echoed through the small break room of Carver and Cole's upscale furniture showroom in downtown Atlanta. At the center of the commotion stood Gordon Stiles, the regional manager, his face red and finger pointing directly at a young man standing by the vending machine, still holding an unopened bottle of water in his hand. The young man was Marcus Hill, 27, soft-spoken and composed. He wore the company's navy blue polo shirt tucked into pressed khakis, his employee ID clipped neatly to his belt. His hands trembled slightly, not out of guilt but disbelief. "I didn't steal anything," Marcus said, his voice low but steady. Gordon turned to the store's assistant manager, a nervous woman named Claire, who looked torn between deferring to her boss and questioning the absurdity of what she was witnessing. "He put something in his backpack," Gordon barked. "I saw it." Claire's eyes flicked to Marcus, then to the security camera mounted in the corner of the break room. "We can check the footage," she suggested cautiously. Gordon's eyes narrowed. "You really think I'd lie about this?" "I think," Marcus interrupted, still calm despite the tension, "that I deserve a fair chance." "You're accusing me of theft in front of my coworkers? That's serious," Gordon scoffed. "Give me the bag," he ordered. Marcus stared at him, his jaw tightening. "With all due respect, I'd rather wait for security." Gordon snatched the bag from Marcus's shoulder without warning, tearing open the zipper and dumping its contents onto the break room table. Inside were a lunchbox, a book of poetry, a worn Bible, a phone charger, and a small framed photo of a woman holding a baby. No stolen merchandise, nothing from the showroom, nothing at all. Gordon's eyes twitched. "Where is it?" he muttered. "Where's what?" Marcus asked. "You said you saw me steal. What exactly do you think I took?" "A gold watch," Gordon lied, scrambling now, his confidence starting to fray. "One of the display pieces. You've been working that section all day." Claire turned toward the break room door. "I'm calling security to pull the footage." "Do it," Marcus said. His voice was calm now, almost too calm. It made Claire pause. 10 minutes later, the store's head of security, Malcolm, an older man with a permanent limp and no time for nonsense, entered with a tablet in his hand. He tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward everyone in the room. "Let's watch, shall we?" he said gruffly. The footage rolled. It showed Marcus entering the break room. He placed his bag on the table, opened it, put his lunch inside, zipped it back up, and walked to the vending machine. He inserted a dollar bill, selected a bottle of water, and waited. Then came Gordon. The video showed Gordon walking in, glancing at Marcus and glaring. He stood there for a moment, fists clenched. Then, subtly, he reached into his own pocket, palmed something small and shiny, and dropped it to the ground behind Marcus. The room went silent. Claire covered her mouth. "Oh my God." Gordon looked around wildly. "That's not what happened." Malcolm paused the footage. "You planted the damn watch." "Gordon." Marcus stood frozen, betrayed and humiliated but not surprised. "You set me up," he whispered. "Why?" Gordon's face was flushed with rage and panic. "You think you can come in here, play the part of the perfect employee, get promoted faster than people who've been here for years? You think you're better than me?" Claire stared at him. This is racist. You just accused a man of stealing because he's black." Marcus finished for her. "Let's not pretend it's anything else." Malcolm turned to Claire. "Get HR on the line. Now." "But I didn't," Gordon began, but the words fell apart in his throat. Everyone had seen the video. "Let's go," Malcolm said, gesturing toward the hallway. "Before you make this worse." The fallout was immediate. Gordon was escorted out of the building, still sputtering excuses, while HR launched an internal investigation. The security footage went straight to corporate. So did Marcus's statement, but the damage had already been done. That night, Marcus sat in his one-bedroom apartment, the framed photo of his mother and sister sitting on the kitchen table. He stared at it for a long time, then picked up his phone and dialed. Hey, Ma. Marcus. Baby, how are you? I'm okay. Rough day. You want to talk about it? He hesitated. Got accused of stealing today. Manager tried to frame me. Got caught on camera. Her silence was thick. Then, softly, I'm sorry, baby. I'm not surprised, Marcus said. Just tired. She didn't respond right away. Then she said, You always told me you'd make them see the truth. Today you did. He swallowed. It still hurt. Of course it did. But you held your head high. And that matters. 2 weeks later, the regional director of Carver and Cole, Olivia Warner, requested to meet Marcus in person. She was a sharp, direct woman in her early 50s, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. As Marcus walked into her office, she rose and extended her hand. Marcus, thank you for coming. He shook it, nodding politely. I owe you an apology, and not just for Gordon, but for what this experience must have felt like. Marcus didn't smile. It felt like being dehumanized. I believe you, she said, which is why I'm here to make it right. She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a letter formal, with corporate letterhead announcing that Marcus had been promoted to assistant regional manager for the entire Southeastern Division. Along with it was a raise, a company vehicle, and full relocation support should he need it. He stared at the offer. Why me? She smiled gently. Because your coworkers unanimously said you were the most ethical, hard-working person in the building. And because we watched you handle a false accusation with grace, most of us couldn't muster. And Gordon, terminated, blacklisted from our industry. He nodded. I want to use this role to change things, not just for me, for anyone like me. That's exactly why we chose you. Months passed. Marcus took his new role with quiet determination. He introduced new training on unconscious bias. He held monthly roundtables with employees from every level, and he never once spoke Gordon's name again. But the message was clear. One afternoon, as he was leaving the showroom, a young intern, Andre, barely 19, ran up to him. Mr. Hill, just Marcus, he smiled. I wanted to say thanks for, being here. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Andre hesitated. My cousin told me not to apply here. Said places like this don't care about people like us. But then I saw your name on the leadership board, and I thought, maybe it's changing. Marcus looked at the young man, saw the spark of hope in his eyes. He remembered his mother's voice on the phone that night. You held your head high, and that matters. He clapped Andre on the shoulder. It is changing, and we're just getting started. And with that, they walked out the door into a future where the cameras didn't just catch injustice, they exposed it. And finally, they helped erase it. Marcus arrived at work the next morning earlier than usual. The air in the showroom was still, the soft light from the display windows casting long shadows over the high-end furniture pieces that gleamed under the spotlights. He walked slowly through the showroom, past the section where he used to arrange throw pillows with precise symmetry, past the glass cases where luxury watches and leather goods once lay under his care. He paused at the spot near the break room where it all happened. The silence felt different now, not heavy, like it had that day, but awake, watchful, honest. Claire came up behind him, her heels clicking gently on the polished floor. You're early, she said softly. He turned and nodded. Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd get a head start on inventory. She held out a steaming coffee cup. Thought you might say that. He accepted it with a small smile. Thanks. The first meant to say something sooner, she added, her voice laced with guilt. Back then, I should have stood up for you faster. You did more than most would have, Marcus replied. You believed me enough to check the tape, Claire sighed. Still, I learned something from all this. About listening. About not assuming power means truth. Marcus nodded slowly. Power just means volume. Truth is quieter, but it lasts longer, Claire smiled, impressed. You always speak like that, he chuckled. Only before the caffeine wears off. They shared a quiet moment, sipping coffee side by side. two people who had seen a storm pass and were left with a clearer view of the sky. Later that afternoon, Marcus called a meeting in the conference room. Employees filtered in, curious. Some still expected a corporate PR gesture. Others just wanted answers. Marcus stood at the front. No notes, no podium, just his presence. "I won't waste your time," he began. "You all know what happened. You've seen the footage. And some of you have probably had experiences like mine, some worse, some quieter." The room was still. "I was accused of stealing," he continued. "Not because I did anything wrong, but because someone thought I didn't belong." And in that moment, he used his authority not to protect this company, but to protect his ego. A few heads nodded. "But, the cameras were watching," he said. "And so were some of you. And that made the difference." He looked around, making eye contact with every single person in the room. "From now on, our policy isn't just zero tolerance for theft. It's zero tolerance for bias, zero tolerance for silent complicity, zero tolerance for mistreatment, whether it's based on race, gender, dodge, or background." There was a pause, heavy but hopeful. Then someone clapped, then another, and then the whole room applauded. Marcus didn't smile out of pride. He smiled out of relief, because change, finally, was not just happening, it was being chosen. A few weeks later, Carver and Cole launched a company-wide initiative called Eyes Forward. It focused on equitable treatment, anonymous reporting, and a mentorship program for underrepresented employees. Marcus was named its national spokesperson. On the day of the launch, Marcus stood before an even larger crowd at the company's regional conference, this time flanked by Olivia Warner and other board members. "This isn't just about hiring more people of color," Marcus said. "It's about creating an environment where we don't have to work twice as hard to be seen as half as good." The applause was thunderous, but not everyone was clapping. Miles away, in a cramped office of a mid-tier furniture competitor, Gordon Stiles stared at his monitor in disbelief. His name had quietly become radioactive in the retail world. Applications were ignored. Interviews were rescinded. His network shrank to zero. He had tried to sue for wrongful termination, but the evidence was airtight. He'd been caught red-handed, literally. He clicked play on the live stream of the Carver and Cole conference, the camera zooming in on Marcus's face. His voice rang through the speakers. "And to every manager out there, know that your words carry weight, but your actions, they carry legacy." Gordon slammed the laptop shut. Meanwhile, Marcus was backstage, sipping water between interviews with news outlets who had picked up the story. A young reporter named Janelle approached him with wide eyes and a genuine smile. "Mr. Hill, may I ask one last question for our evening broadcast?" "Sure. If you could go back to that moment in the break room and tell yourself one thing, what would it be?" He paused, then said softly, "You're not alone, and they won't break you." 1 year later, Marcus stood on a small stage in a community center gymnasium in southwest Atlanta. The walls were decorated with student drawings. Rows of folding chairs were filled with young men and women of all backgrounds, many wearing name tags for the Next Step mentorship program. Behind him, a banner read, "Success is measured by impact." He adjusted the mic and looked into the crowd. "I used to work in a store," he began. "I arranged furniture and smiled for customers. And one day, I got accused of something I didn't do, because I looked like someone who might do it. That moment could have broken me, but it didn't." A boy in the front row, no older than 16, leaned forward, eyes wide. "Instead," Marcus said, "it lit a fire. And that fire brought me here." He stepped off the stage and into the crowd, greeting students, shaking hands, asking about dreams, not jobs, dreams. Because now, Marcus Hill didn't just survive injustice, he turned it into a path, and he made sure it was wide enough for everyone else to walk through too. He drove home that night with the window down, the cool Atlanta breeze rushing through the open driver's side, as the city lights shimmered around him. His phone buzzed against the console, the screen lighting up with his sister's name, Simone Hill. He answered with a grin. "Hey, little sis, you were on the news, Marcus," she said, her voice bright with excitement. "You looked like a boss." He laughed. "I am a boss, I know, but still, like, you're on TV making speeches, changing lives. Remember when you used to coach my spelling bee practice in the kitchen?" "Yeah." "And you cried because you spelled boulevard wrong." She huffed playfully. "I was 8. He smiled. The road stretched ahead of him, open and warm, the weight of the past few months settling into something else, something that felt like purpose. "Thanks for watching, Simone. I watch everything you do. Always have." His voice softened. "I love you. I love you too." And with that, he hung up and drove on, past the streetlights, past the shadows, past the history that had once threatened to define him. Not anymore. Now he chose what defined him. 3 months later, Marcus stood in front of the board of directors at Carver and Cole HQ in New York City. The skyline behind him was sharp and glimmering, like the future he was shaping. "We've had record-breaking employee retention since implementing Eyes Forward," he said. "Customer satisfaction's up, internal conflict is down, and we've received over 200 mentorship applications in the last 60 days. The room nodded in unison. An older board member, pale-skinned and rigid, raised a brow. "And you think it's all because of a single incident?" "No," Marcus replied. "I think that incident showed us who we were. What came after showed us who we could be." The boardroom was silent for a long second. Then the chairwoman smiled and said, "Well said." After the meeting, Olivia approached him in the hallway. "Ever considered a seat at this table?" Marcus blinked. "Me? You already changed the culture. Might as well change the company." He looked out the window. "Let's just say I'm open." But back in Atlanta, in a quiet suburb, a different kind of conversation was happening. Gordon Stiles, hunched and bitter, sat across from a lawyer in a gray suit. "So," Gordon snapped, "can I sue for defamation or what?" The lawyer didn't look up from his tablet. "You planted a stolen item on an employee." Gordon, on camera. "You admitted it under investigation. No, you can't sue. You're lucky no one's pressing criminal charges." Gordon's fists clenched on the table. "He embarrassed me. That boy humiliated me." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "No, you humiliated yourself. He just let the truth do the talking." Back at the showroom, Claire stood at the front register, training a new employee, a tall, nervous young man named Julian. "So you've got your login credentials. This is your ID badge. And that office back there," she pointed, "that's Marcus Hill's office. He's our regional manager now." Julian's eyes widened. "Wait, the Marcus Hill, the guy from the news?" Claire smiled. "The same. He comes around once or twice a week now. You'll like him." Just then, Marcus entered through the front doors, clipboard in hand, smiling. "Speak of the legend," Claire joked. Julian stepped forward awkwardly. "Sir, it's an honor. I applied here because of you." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Glad to have you, Julian. Just remember one thing. Yeah, you don't have to prove yourself to anyone. Just do your job well, and speak up if anyone tries to silence you." Julian nodded, his chest puffing out a little more. That night, Marcus sat at home again, this time staring at his living room wall, where a single photograph now hung in a sleek black frame. It was a still from the security footage, Gordon standing behind him, mid-motion, hand clearly dropping the planted watch. He had printed it for one reason, as a reminder, not of pain, but of the power of evidence, of truth, of staying calm in the face of injustice. Beside it hung another frame, this one newer, a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Falsely Accused Employee Becomes Regional Manager, Launches National Equality Program." In the photo, Marcus stood surrounded by young interns and mentees, smiling, grounded, whole. But he wasn't done yet. 6 months later, Marcus was invited to speak at a national leadership summit in Washington, D.C. The theme, Justice in the Workplace. On stage, he stood behind a glass lectern in front of thousands. When I was a kid, my mom told me, you might be seen as a threat before you're ever seen as a person, but you don't have to become the threat they fear. You become the man you know you are. He scanned the audience. I was accused of stealing. I was publicly shamed. But what they didn't realize was I had something stronger than fear. I had truth. I had character. And I had a camera, laughter, applause, roars. He raised a hand. But let me say this. Don't wait for injustice to be caught on tape before you act. Stand up before the cameras roll. Speak out before the damage is done. Be the voice that never stays quiet. A standing ovation followed after the conference. As he was walking out of the auditorium, a woman stopped him. She was in her 60s, white hair in a bun, a sharp suit, and a sad smile. I wanted to say thank you, she said. My son, he's a lot like you. Except when it happened to him, there was no camera. Marcus took her hand. Tell him his story still matters. She teared up. You make it matter. 1 year to the day after the break room incident, the Carver and Cole store in Atlanta hosted a celebration. Employees gathered around tables of food and shared stories. Claire raised a toast to progress, to voices that won't be silenced, and to Marcus Hill. Everyone clapped. Marcus stood up with a glass of sparkling cider. I used to think the worst part about being falsely accused was the moment itself. But now I know it's what happens after that defines you. You can become bitter, or you can become better. The team lifted their glasses to better. That night, long after the celebration ended, Marcus walked alone through the empty showroom. He passed the glass display where, once upon a time, a gold watch went missing. He stopped. The watch now sat there again, not the same one, but a similar model. Next to it, a small placard read, "Integrity isn't seen until it's tested." This case remains a reminder of that truth. Dedicated to Marcus Hill. He stood for a long moment, reading the words over and over. Then, slowly, he turned off the showroom lights, one by one. Outside, the city shimmered with promise. Marcus stepped into the night, the door closing softly behind him, not as an end, but as the beginning of everything he had yet to build. And the cameras, they were still watching. But now, they saw a man who didn't need proof anymore. He was the proof. Marcus stepped into his car and sat quietly for a moment before starting the engine. The dashboard lights glowed softly in the dark, and the radio flicked on, playing some smooth jazz that barely registered in his ears. He stared out at the road ahead, his reflection faint in the glass, his mind not on where he was going, but on where he came from. That first accusation, the feeling of the room turning against him, the humiliation, the silence, the unspoken threat that whispered, "You don't belong here." He remembered every heartbeat, every breath he forced to stay even, every moment he'd felt his dignity slipping through someone else's fingers. And now those same fingers were gone, and the truth he carried had grown into something bigger, something no one could take away. He pulled out of the parking lot and drove down familiar streets until he reached a neighborhood he hadn't visited in years. One of the buildings stood cracked and aging, the paint peeling, but still standing firm. He parked out front and walked up the steps. The door opened before he knocked. "Marcus," said an elderly woman, her gray hair wrapped in a pink scarf, her eyes wide with surprise. "You didn't call. Didn't want to give you time to tell me no." Miss Ellen laughed and stepped aside. "You're always welcome here, boy. Come in." Inside, the house smelled like lavender and old books. The same lace curtains hung over the windows, the same floral couch that squeaked when he sat down. "You still remember how to sit like a gentleman," she teased, bringing him a glass of sweet tea. "I try." She sat across from him. "What brings you here?" "Marcus Hill. You used to come every Saturday with your mama." "I wanted to see the place where I learned how to read," he said softly. Miss Ellen smiled. "That old bookshelf over there?" He nodded. "I remember you making me read To Kill a Mockingbird. Told me to watch how the world treats people like Tom Robinson. And what did you learn? That sometimes people don't want the truth, but the truth shows up anyway." She nodded slowly. I saw you on the news, Marcus. I figured you did. I cried, she whispered, because I remember you sitting here so quiet, so polite. And I thought, please God, don't let the world break that boy. He looked down, his fingers curled around the glass. It tried, but you didn't let it, she said, reaching over and touching his hand. And now look at you. The next day, Marcus stood at the podium of an Atlanta high school, delivering a guest lecture to students in their final year. I'm not here to tell you the world is fair, he began, his tone honest, weighty. I'm not even here to tell you that if you work hard, everything will go right. Because that's not true either. A few students raised their eyebrows, surprised. But I am here to tell you that your name, your story, your voice, they matter more than you know. And when someone tries to erase that, you don't shrink, you don't run, you rise. A girl in the front row wiped her eyes. Marcus continued. I was accused of stealing by someone who didn't think I should be where I was. That person had power. He had position. But what he didn't have was truth. He paused. And in the end, that's all I needed. Back at headquarters, Olivia Warner met with the board once more. She stood at the center of the room, a folder in her hand. Marcus Hill has led our most successful reform effort in company history, she said. His work has been cited in industry journals, and we've received invitations to present our model in DC, Toronto, and London. She handed out printed reports. Today I'm recommending a title change, effective immediately. Marcus Hill will serve as Vice President of Employee Integrity and Equity. The board chair raised a brow. A new department, a necessary one, Olivia said, and one that should have existed long ago. The motion passed unanimously. When Marcus received the news, he was alone in his office. He looked down at the title on the letter, Vice President. His fingers hovered over the page. A knock at the door. It was Julian, now months into his job and flourishing. Got a sec. Always, Marcus said, gesturing him in. I just wanted to tell you, I applied for the internal mentorship program because of you. Marcus smiled. That's great, Julian. There's more, he said nervously. They accepted me, and they're assigning me to a mentor in Chicago. I'd be working directly under the Midwest team lead. That's huge. Why? I wasn't sure if I should go. Why not? Because this store, it gave me something I never had before. I didn't want to feel like I was leaving behind the people who believed in me. Marcus stood and walked around his desk. Julian, this store gave me that too. But what matters isn't who you leave behind. It's who you take with you. Julian blinked. What do you mean? You carry us in your work, in the way you treat people, in the way you speak. We're not going anywhere. We'll be right there with you. Julian grinned. Thanks, Mr. Hill. Marcus. Time passed. Marcus's new title came with travel, meetings, speaking engagements, but he never stopped visiting his original store in Atlanta. It kept him grounded, honest, real. One day, as he walked in, he saw something different near the front of the store. A new installation, a glass case. Inside it sat a pair of items, a gold watch, and a nameplate, not Gordon's, but Marcus's. Underneath it, engraved in bronze, were the words, "Justice doesn't wait for power. It walks with truth." Marcus stared at it, frozen. Claire walked up beside him. Corporate's idea, she said. We wanted to honor what started here. He turned to her. This isn't about me. It is, she said, because if it wasn't for you, we'd still be pretending that silence was neutral. He took a breath. Thank you. That evening, Marcus hosted his very first city-wide mentorship summit at Georgia State University. The turnout was massive. Students, professionals, educators, families, people who had seen the news, people who had lived it. At the end of the night, as the crowd thinned and chairs were stacked, Marcus stood on stage alone, looking out over the auditorium. A young boy, maybe 12, approached the steps timidly. Sir, Marcus bent down. Hey there, what's your name? Caleb. You come with your school? Yeah. But I wanted to meet you, 'cause I want to be like you. Marcus's heart caught in his throat. You don't want to be like me, Caleb, he said gently. You want to be you. Just make sure when you speak, people listen. And when you see something wrong, you do something right. Caleb nodded. Okay. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pin, the logo of Eyes Forward. Here, he said, wear this, not because it looks cool, but because it means something. Caleb held it like it was gold. Later that night, Marcus sat on his balcony, sipping tea, overlooking the skyline. The city buzzed below. Never quiet, never still. His phone buzzed. A new email, subject line, speaking invitation, United Nations Human Rights Summit, Geneva. He read it twice, then smiled. He didn't respond yet. Instead, he looked up at the stars and whispered, I'm ready. Weeks passed, then a month. The invitation to speak at the United Nations Human Rights Summit in Geneva had stayed pinned at the top of Marcus's inbox, always read, never replied. He wasn't hesitating out of fear. He was waiting for the right moment, the one that told him he wasn't just going as a representative of a company or even a movement, but as something larger. The moment came on a rainy Friday afternoon. He was visiting one of the newer Carver and Cole outlets in Birmingham, Alabama, a place with fresh paint, smiling greeters, and a diverse team just beginning to understand what it meant to be truly equal in the workplace. He was touring the break room when he saw an older employee sitting alone by the vending machine. The man wore a faded name tag, Howard. Mind if I sit? Marcus asked. Howard looked up, surprised, then shrugged. Sure. They sat in silence for a moment, the distant buzz of fluorescent lights humming above them. I know who you are, Howard said, not looking directly at Marcus. I figured. I've been with this company for 23 years. Seen all kinds of managers, policies, training videos, but nothing changed. Not really. Until you. Marcus frowned. I didn't do it alone. Howard smiled faintly. Doesn't matter. You were the first one I saw who looked like me, who stood up and didn't break. That changed something. Marcus leaned back. I appreciate that. Howard turned to face him. Don't turn down that thing. We need someone like you to speak for people like us. Marcus raised an eyebrow. How did you know? I hadn't said yes. Howard chuckled. Old men know things. Marcus stared at him for a moment, then reached for his phone, pulled up the email, and tapped reply. Subject, speaking invitation, United Nations Human Rights Summit. Geneva message. I would be honored to attend. I accept. He hit send. 2 months later, Marcus stepped off a plane in Switzerland. He wore a dark, tailored suit, not flashy, just enough to signal presence. Around him, the world buzzed with languages he didn't know, faces from every continent, security details, interpreters, NGO workers, and world leaders. His name badge simply read, Marcus Hill, United States, Carver and Cole. Incorporated. He took a deep breath. The summit was held in a historic marble building overlooking Lake Geneva. Inside, glass walls towered over the assembly hall, sunlight pouring in across hundreds of delegates seated in a perfect arc. When his name was announced, the applause wasn't roaring. It was respectful, curious, and then quiet. Marcus walked to the podium, placed both hands on either side, and looked out at a sea of global decision-makers. He spoke slowly. 2 years ago, I was accused of stealing, not by a stranger on the street, but by my manager, a man who had power, a man who used it carelessly. He paused. Had it not been for a camera, I would have lost my job, my reputation, and maybe even my future. The room was still, but it wasn't the camera that saved me. It was the truth, and the people around me who chose to see it, who chose not to look away. He scanned the room, his voice strengthening. We like to believe that discrimination is a shadow in our past, that if we make the right statements, it disappears. But it doesn't. It adapts. It hides in silence, in the assumption, in the shrug, and sometimes in the very people hired to lead. He leaned forward, I speak today not just for myself. I speak for every worker who has been accused before proven. Every employee who has been promoted last, questioned first, and believed least. A hush fell over the room. He finished with one final sentence. And if our institutions refuse to change, then the people inside them must become the change. As he stepped back, the applause began softly, then louder and louder, until it shook the marble walls. Back in Atlanta, Simone watched the speech live from her apartment, tears streaking down her cheeks. She texted her brother one word, powerful. Marcus replied with a heart emoji, nothing else. 6 months later, Carver and Cole announced a partnership with several global human rights organizations to fund programs designed to combat workplace discrimination across all industries. Marcus Hill was appointed to lead the initiative. He now split his time between Atlanta, New York, and cities around the world, meeting with policymakers, CEOs, and civil rights groups. Yet, no matter how far he traveled, he always returned to the original showroom. One rainy Tuesday, he visited again. The store looked the same, but when he walked past the break room, something caught his eye. A new plaque. It was mounted just outside the door where it all began. This space is dedicated to the moment. Truth was chosen over power, to the dignity of those falsely accused, and to the courage of those who refused to stay silent. In honor of Marcus Hill, he stared at it for a long time. Then he walked into the break room, poured himself a coffee, and sat down right under the same camera that had once changed everything. Claire walked in a few minutes later, older now, more confident, smiling as always. "You still sit here like a regular employee," she teased. "I am a regular employee," Marcus replied, sipping his coffee. "Just one with a louder microphone." She sat beside him. "You know they're naming the new leadership center after you." He rolled his eyes. "I told them not to." She laughed. "And they ignored you, like all institutions do to trailblazers." He chuckled, then silence. Then she said, "Would you do it all again?" Marcus looked up at the camera. "Yes," he said, "but this time, I wouldn't wait to speak up." She nodded. "Me either." They sat in silence, the hum of progress buzzing around them, not loud, not fast, but real and unshakable. Marcus stood, straightened his shirt, and turned to leave. But before he walked out the door, he looked back and said, "Let's make sure no one ever has to go through what I did." Claire smiled. "You already started that." He nodded, then left the room and walked straight into the future. Because some stories don't end with revenge. They end with change.